Join me every month for the inspiration to find your finish line. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Find Your Finish Line, presented by Active Ice, the official topical pain relief partner of Ironman. I'm Mike Riley, and this podcast is not only about you being able to find your finish line at an event or a race, but also in life. We have to find our finish line every day, don't we? Every week, every month, every year to keep moving forward. I'll talk with successful people from all backgrounds about their inspiring stories of struggle and achievement in both sport and life. And hopefully, their stories will inspire you to keep moving forward. Now with our fantastic guest, welcome to five-time Ironman World Champion, Craig Alexander. How you doing, mate?
I'm doing good, Mike. How are you?
I'm fantastic. And you know, five-time three Kona titles, and then we got 270.3 titles. And I want to go into a couple of those first, but I've been asking everybody, and, with the pandemic and the last 14, 18 months, how have you been coping with it and keeping the family unit positive and thinking? Because when you got three young kids, they don't exactly think like an adult mind. It's always like every 5 minutes or 10 minutes. So how you been keeping it together with the family?
Yeah, just been trying to stay in the moment. And as terrible as it's been, I always believe there's just a silver lining in every situation. And for us, it was spending a lot of time together through the lockdown and the homeschooling and all of that. And of course, my wife, Nerida, being an emergency room nurse, she had to work a lot. She was on the front line. And so I was in charge of homeschooling, which was interesting. That's tougher than an Ironman, that is. But, I think we just tried to stay in the moment and kind of like being an athlete. I think all the lessons you learn being an athlete through your racing, they serve you well and later on in life, and just tried to take care of the things each day that we could and make it as fun as possible because, of course, they are kids. Our eldest, Lucy, she's in year 11 now in high school, so she was pretty much running her own race during lockdown anyway. But, yeah, we just tried to go on family bike rides and do the things we could do within whatever the restrictions or the limitations were. But, like all storms, Mike, they all pass sooner or later, and you just do your best.
Yeah, and I need to throw this out to you. Dude, you have a 16-year-old. I mean, I remember when they were like this, and now you've got a 16-year-old young daughter, and she's going to be 18. She's going to be 20. You got to get yourself ready for that.
I've been getting ready. It's been a long preparation, like an Ironman training prep. But she already thinks she's 18 and 20. But it's the best thing in life is being a parent, and it challenges you every day. But it's funny, and yes, you hear people say time flies. It does. I mean, I was lucky that pretty much the entirety of my career racing in Kona, and even before that, I got to share with Neri and all three of the kids. Lucy first, of course, being the eldest. So they're some of our best memories. But yeah, just time does fly. And I was just saying to Neri the other day, obviously life moves on, and you can't do the things you love to do. Sometimes being an athlete, you get older and you have to find other things to do, which is great. It's part of life. But a lot of the sadness for me with that came not only the racing and the challenge of it and preparing for each event and having every sort of month scheduled and knowing what you were doing each day and the planning around those big challenges, but was also the things that come with that. And for me, that was spending 4 months of the year in Boulder and also a month of the year in Hawaii. And I miss those two things as well, as much as I miss the training and the competitive aspect and a lot of the great friends that I made. I just miss being in those great places where we formed lifelong friendships. And, as Kona is very special. I think it hurt everybody last year not being able to go. Not only the athletes, mainly the athletes, but also the people who just love to go there and catch up and be in and around that environment and that race in October. So life passes pretty quickly, and you've got to make the most of every day.
I agree. We all agree. There's no doubt about that. So, Craig, take us back to your young self doing your first triathlons, and so many age groupers are, we got a lot of new people still coming into the sport, which is fantastic. They're trying to find their way with swim, bike, and run, which is not the easiest journey to always take. But tell us about what you struggled with at the beginning of your career that may help somebody else who could be struggling with the very same thing. What did you struggle with?
I struggled with a lot of things. I mean, I struggled with time because when I started, I was probably a late starter to the sport. In relative terms, as a professional athlete or someone who was hoping to be a professional, I was a late starter because I didn't start until my early 20s. But obviously, these days we see a lot of age groupers, amateurs coming into the sport in their 40s and 50s, which is not that unusual. So I think one of the main struggles you have is time. You've got family commitments, you've got work commitments. How do you fit the training in around that? How do you balance your training time with your expectations? I think all of those internal conversations and challenges that we all face, you know better than most, Mike. I mean, you've got a privileged position in our sport on a lot of finish lines, and the people you call across the line. We're a unique breed, just driven people who love a challenge. Some would say type A personalities. So sometimes the greatest challenge that we face is balancing our own expectations with realistically how much time we have and all the other commitments in our day. So I think, and that's different for every athlete, whatever level you're at, and you have to be at peace with and realistic with your time availability and what your aspirations are. So I'd say that's one thing I certainly struggled with. And I know a lot of the athletes that I talk to struggle with that as well. Life is busy. So that's one of the first challenges. And also for me, I guess more specifically with the sport, I was a soccer player until I was 20. I came into triathlon as a 180-pound soccer player. Who would have thought several years down the track I'd be a trim, taut 150 pounds and vying for world titles? But, it wasn't always that way. I was a soccer player. I had no real background in endurance sports. The closest I'd come to a triathlon was watching them on television, watching races like the IRONMAN in Hawaii on the Wide Water Sports, watching Dave and Mark and Paula and Erin race, watching a lot of the other famous events in CROWIE, Chicago. It wasn't unusual to see those on television in Australia. So even though I was very entrenched in my prior sporting life as a soccer player, I was aware of the sport of triathlon and very interested in it. But yeah, I had a lot of challenges when I started changing my body, shape and my abilities, learning to swim. In Australia, we all learn to swim at a young age, but when I talk about learning to swim, I mean, diving into a swim squad for the first time and having to do 3 miles, which was unheard of for a soccer player, and then learning the nuances of riding a bike. I mean, I think, again, in Australia, we've got a great climate. We're outdoors 12 months of the year. Growing up, we all ride our little bikes around the neighborhood, but riding a racing bike with your feet attached to the pedals, all of those things, and learning the training. I mean, they're challenges that I faced. I think every athlete faces those at some point, and it's not unlike the challenges that a 40 or 50-year-old amateur in our sport would face. So I think I would just say to them, you're not alone. Everyone's faced those challenges. And the great news is there's a lot of resources and people out there who can help you. So you need to tap into those.
Yeah, there are plenty of resources. They do need to tap. So we can talk about Kona. You won it in 08, 09, you won it in 11. I always like telling the story in 08, you and Neri standing in the after party off to the side all by yourselves and kind of just talking to one another. The world changed for you that year in the sport of triathlon. You won the 70.3 in 06 and I think 10. But when you got that Kona title, the world changed for you. Did it change in a way that you had expected or something you had prepared for, or was it just a blind side?
Yeah, I don't know if you ever can prepare fully for something until you live through it and experience it. So, I'd won some big races at that point. I'd won the Lifetime Fitness race in Minnesota, which was a big deal for a short course athlete. It was an invitation-only event. at the time, the largest prize purse in the history of our sport against, the best short course athletes in the world live on television. So I guess I was fortunate to have stepping stones along my development as an athlete, but also your development mentally and emotionally to be able to prepare you for those moments. And I think the greatest thing was just the people I had around me. It was a lot of the same people, obviously Neri, my close friends, my training partners. And, I think that's possibly the best thing I ever did in my career, or the thing I did most consistently well, was surround myself with good people. And that always started at home with Neri and immediate family. And I think when you're in that sort of an environment, you're always well equipped to deal with whatever life throws at you. So I had good voices around me, good people. But yeah, man, it was a real trip to, the year before, when I raced in Kona for the first time, I said, just being there, walking around the pier, having seen it on television so many times. And it's just, yeah, you hear people say it's like being a kid in a candy store. It's all of that and more. It's something that you've thought about and wondered what it would be like, and then you're living it, and it feels real and not real all at the same time. So I think for me, '07 was good preparation, just getting there that first year and experiencing the race. And of course, I finished second on debut. And I think that for me, that was a good just stepping stone in my development. And to win in your second appearance, it's mind blowing. And I felt very lucky and privileged. And yeah.
That first time when you were there, and you were only like 4 minutes behind your countryman, Chris McCormick. So you definitely put yourself on the map with that second place. You said, I read one time where you said, I think I heard you talk about it once on a panel I was at, where, you can be defeated and it hurts. It can hurt a lot, but not performing up to your full potential hurts even worse. Were there events where all of a sudden you came out and go, what the heck? Why did I not give it my all? Obviously that bothers you worse than a defeat. Was there one particular event where that just stuck with you? Like, what the heck was I doing there? Why didn't I perform up to my potential?
Yeah, for me, effort was never a problem. I was always an effort guy, even as a soccer player. And it was more about execution for me a lot of the time. And I guess dealing with the nervousness and the anxiety that I would put on myself. So not one race in particular that comes to mind, but mate, there were a multitude of occasions where I'd be either talking with the media at the post race press conference, and a lot of the time you haven't even had to process what happened yourself because it's still fresh. It's happened that day,
yeah.
And I'd be sitting there thinking, there'd be occasions where I'd won races. And I'd be talking about it, answering questions, but in my mind, I'd be thinking, well, geez, I made so many mistakes today. Like, I won the race. I guess in itself, that's part of the battle. And then there were other occasions where I'd performed really, really well, but hadn't won the race, hadn't crossed the line first. So I guess everybody frames things differently. But for me, mentally, it became clear that sometimes you win a race, and by definition, that just means you cross the line first. But what does that mean related to your performance? Have you performed up to potential? Have you? So those two things became almost mutually exclusive. As a professional athlete, you obviously want to win. That's when you get paid, and that's when you get the sponsors. But it was deeper than that for me, and for a lot of athletes that I spoke to as well. It's, and I think it becomes apparent when you start analyzing it and verbalizing it to the media and also to yourself that success is different to winning. Success is getting the most out of yourself on all occasions. Sometimes you win, but still underperform. Mm-hmm. So for me, I felt there were occasions where I won races and thought, I didn't train long and hard for months and months and go through all those sacrifices with my family to perform lower than the level that I'd set for myself. And just because I crossed the line first, I'm not going to be content with that. So I guess you sort of separate the result from the performance, and that's where it all became about, not just effort, but execution and fulfilling potential, not just the position that you cross the line.
Right. Well, so much today is about performance psychology, about obviously the mental aspect. It always has been, but obviously there's more studies done on it. And I know you've dove into it quite a bit. Do you believe, Craig, that if you knew more about performance psychology when you were racing back in the day, would it have made your performances better? Would it have made your recovery better? Would you have understood yourself a little bit better? Do you think that's a path that would have enhanced your career?
100%. I think about it all the time. And, I'm very fortunate I get to tell my story a little bit in some corporate settings and to junior athletes at schools. And I understand myself more now than I did when I was racing. And I know more about that element of the performance, the psychology of performance than I did. And it would have helped me immeasurably, because I just think the greatest attribute any athlete can have is self-awareness, understanding what it is that makes you tick, what drives you. And from that point, all of the subsequent details fall into place around the training. But, we're all different. Physiologically, obviously, we're all different, but mentally and emotionally, we're all different. And we thrive in different situations, and understanding what you need around you from an emotional standpoint with your relationships, and also unlocking, the mind-body connection is very strong. Those two things cannot be separated. The mind controls the body. You can be the physically in unbelievable shape. You can be the physically fittest person on the start line, but if you're not in a good place mentally and emotionally where you're motivated, and you talked about the psychology and all the studies that have been done. There's 100 studies that have talked about an athlete's willingness to endure is always higher when they're more motivated, when they're happy. There are all these other elements, these psychological elements that you can put in place, which actually enhance your physical performance. And I know I wasn't aware of a lot of them during the peak of my career. I mean, I'd scratched the surface. I was aware of them, but hadn't, I guess, delved as more deeply as I have now. And I mean, it's something I think about all the time. I'm often considering going back to do some sort of sports psychology degree, postgraduate degree. It just interests me.
Hold on, everyone. We'll be right back after a message from our sponsors. As an endurance athlete, you're constantly pushing your body to new limits, searching for your personal best, for the next finish line. If you're training for an endurance event, whether short distance or long distance, proper recovery is the key to you unlocking your potential. As the official topical pain relief partner for the Ironman US series, Active Ice's lineup of topical cooling gel, roll-on and spray features 8% menthol and eucalyptus oil to provide the instant icy relief you need to recover smarter and faster. The water-based, non-sticky formula withstands sweat to keep up with the demands and exertion of race day. Don't let muscle pain or sprains hold you back from reaching your potential, from reaching your personal best. Shop the Active Ice's lineup on Amazon today for the support you need to find your finish line. So yeah, the psychology, Craig, is vital. It's just a matter of of knowing it and practicing it. And I kind of saw that with you. You had such a incredible career. In 2011, you won Kona, and then you came to, after Kona, I think it was 2012. Yeah, you came to Melbourne, and you went sub 8 hours there. Then in 2013, when I was working that race, you finished a 5th at Melbourne. And I interviewed you at the finish, and it was very emotional because you didn't have the performance that you wanted. You felt that I believed your Ironman career maybe was on the wane, and you didn't know how you were going to get it back, and you just kind of wanted to walk away. Walk us through that, because that had to be a real emotional roller coaster for you, coming in 5th when you wanted to win the race. But things were leading up to that, to where you weren't having the performances you thought you should have.
Yeah, well, I just think for me personally, it was almost a mental slide more than a physical one. So that alludes to what we were speaking about before. And, it's one thing to be physically capable to perform. The question is, do you still have the mental desire and the motivation to do it? And I was getting to a point where we'd been traveling internationally for 20 years. our third child, Lani, had just been born. So she was just a baby, weeks old. And, I was starting to have a lot of feelings of guilt, actually, that how much more racing, how much more winning is enough. And I guess, again, it comes down to self-awareness and an insight into what you want as a person and what you want for your family. And I just kind of felt, if I go to Kona, can I perform physically? I felt I could, but at what cost to the rest of my life? And my wife had been so supportive for so long. I was just really having a lot of feelings of guilt about this existence. And I wouldn't say I was a selfish person, but by definition, as an athlete, you do need to be self-centered. You're always worried about your training, your race schedule, your diet, your recovery. There's a lot of, self-focused attention, and which is a kind of a paradox when you become a parent. It's the opposite of what really happens when you become a parent. So I was struggling with all of those things, Mike. Yeah, I was emotional at the time, and I had feelings of guilt because I felt obligated to my sponsors as well. I thought, well, this is my job, and if I can still physically perform, why would I pull back? But you negotiate those things. There's no university or college that prepares you for being a professional athlete. It's sort of on-the-job training. And again, it comes down to what you talked about, the mental side of it. You used an interesting word about the mental practice. That I was very fortunate early in my career. I crossed paths with a sports psychologist, and she said things to me 25 years ago that I utilized and used certain strategies every day of my career and even now in my life. She talked about being an athlete. You train 3-4 times a day. You're swimming, you're biking, you're running every day, you're in the gym, you're practicing physically. She said to me, what mental practice are you doing? So that your mental development keeps pace with your physical development. So, yeah, it was an interesting time coming to the end of my Ironman career. I knew I still loved the sport and I wanted to be involved. But yeah, I was torn between should I push on? As you get older, there's no question. I think we've seen in our sport, from a physical and endurance perspective, you can excel in your late 30s into your 40s. There's no question. Mm-hmm. But the body needs a lot more TLC at that point. You need to nurture it, love it more. It needs more attention, more body work. And a full-time job becomes a full-time job plus more with all the extras that you need to do. And yeah, I was starting to feel very guilty about this. Was too all-consuming for the family, and we'd already been doing it for nearly 2 decades, Neri and I anyway. So I was really struggling with what the way forward should be, but I think I navigated it. I wouldn't say well. I had to get some good advice from a lot of trusted people and mentors, advisors, and I wanted to stay involved in the sport. I didn't want to walk away, and certainly from racing, and I still felt physically I could compete at the shorter distances. I felt that if I wasn't going to, I couldn't do Ironman racing and not do Kona. So for me, the way forward was stop the Ironman racing and maybe continue with 70.3 racing, half distance racing, and Olympic distance. So that's what I chose to do.
Good for you. I know. I love it. And just a little switch here. Our sport and men's and women's diversity, dynamics, and the roles in the workplace, the roles in sport and in life, they're being recalibrated and defined more now than ever, which is a great thing. But talk to us about how you believe our sport, our events are doing in this category, and what kind of grade would you give them if you want to do that, or what kind of advice could you give them so that we become a sport of diversity, and we become a sport that is all-encompassing and welcomes everybody?
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, how would I score them? I think they're heading, like, change doesn't happen quickly, as you know, Mike. Change doesn't happen quickly, but sometimes it needs to change needs to happen. And I think from the gender equality standpoint to start with, I think we're doing okay. I mean, we have equal prize money. I think from a media standpoint, we have equal attention on the men's and the ladies, and I think that's important. I mean, I have 2 daughters, and I would hate to think that they didn't have all the opportunities that my son has in sport or in business or anywhere. Now, I would be naive to think that the world is perfect and they are going to have those opportunities, but I think actions speak louder than words, and I guess we have a chance in our sport to be leaders. I think, I read somewhere that we're one of the few sports that has equal prize money. I think we should have equal qualifying spots throughout as well. I don't think there's any harm in, and I know maybe the depth in women's racing is not quite there. I don't know the numbers in terms of participation, how many professional license holders there are in men's racing compared to women's, but I just think even a gesture like that just sets the tone that we're all about trying to even things up, and we're about pushing in the right direction, even if the infrastructure and everything is not in place. That's a good starting point. So I think we're doing okay in terms of the inclusivity. Yeah, I mean, I would like to think that as a sport, for me, sport is one of those arenas that it's objective. It's about how good you are, or how much, or how at the highest level, it's about how good you are, or it should be, and at every level, it's about just a desire to put effort in and have a crack at something. That's what I say to my kids. The teams that I've coached in different things, that's what I say to them. I just think nobody should be precluded from doing any sport. So, the world is not perfect, and each generation, I guess, has a chance to do things better. I'm not about throwing people under the bus, but I am about looking back historically and seeing what's been done well and what could be done better, and I think learning the lessons and moving forward, because for me, it just comes down to common sense. Sport is one of those arenas nobody should be precluded from participating. And from the professional standpoint, nobody should be precluded if they're good enough, male or female. If you're good enough, that for me, that was always the attraction of sport. I don't think we can say there's no politics in sport. There's no gender inequality. There's no racial inequality. There's all of those things, because sport ends up reflecting life, I guess, and what we see in other areas of life. But wouldn't it be great if sport could be the catalyst to change all of those things? And I think we're doing okay, but it's just one of those things, like everything, or like a lot of things. You have to be vigilant. I think there needs to be a lot of common sense, and we need to have empathy. One of the great attributes all of us can have is empathy, and listening to people who are coming and saying, well, I don't think we're getting a fair shake of this, and the major stakeholders or the governing bodies need to say, okay, well, why not, and see if there's things that can be addressed. Just listening to people. And sometimes they're going to have legitimate concerns, other times not, but it doesn't hurt to listen. And I think all governing bodies, race governance is not easy, sport governance is not easy, just like in business, but empathy and common sense goes a long way. I like to keep things simple, Mike. I just like to keep things simple. I know there's often a lot of stakeholders and a lot of people with skin in the game and agendas, but if we keep things simple and we have empathy and we listen to people and what they're going through, I think if we're smart enough, we can make a decision. Is there a better way forward? And if so, why wouldn't we want to pursue it?
Good for you. I agree totally. And, you mentioned something in what you were just talking about is actions speak louder than words. I always use that, because obviously people coming into the finish line, they don't need to be yelling out and telling people what they're doing, because people see it. The kids see it. Their family and friends see it. How do you think your kids, or the kids you're coaching, what actions are defining you that they see you do without telling them this and that and this and that? What kind of actions you think show them the way, the good way?
Mate, it's a good question. Again, I was always very mindful of that too, doing interviews, because I would be thinking at some point, Lucy, Austin, and Lani, they can Google or search these videos and they can hear the things that I've said, and and also wanted to, I guess, honor my parents and the way they brought me up. I think the easiest thing in life is to be yourself. I know sometimes in the sport entertainment business, there's a tendency to want to sell or be larger than life, and that's fine. But I mean, for me, I just wanted to be myself. I felt that was the easiest way, and and be respectful too. It's great to win. It's awesome to win. It's an amazing feeling, and it hurts to lose. And I think every athlete, if you're around long enough, you experience equal measures of both. I say to my kids all the time, my own children, respect your opposition, respect what they've gone through, because they've gone through a lot of the same things you've gone through. And it's great to win, but surely you can appreciate somebody else's effort as well. And likewise, if you don't win, I'm not saying don't, just shake it off. It should sting. It should hurt a little, for sure. I mean, but, you can still pay homage to someone who's had a great performance. Those two things are separate. Mm-hmm. Being personally wounded by a performance or by not getting the outcome you want, if it stings, okay, well, let's deal with that. We can deal with that. But over here, we can still pay homage or respect to somebody who's put in a great performance. So, yeah, I mean, again, I just think it comes down to the kind of person you are and maybe your upbringing as well. But, sport's tough. It's one of those things. And again, mate, you have a front row seat to it. You see agony and ecstasy within 2 minutes of each other. You see people getting a life-changing performance in a race, and other people who have committed just as much, sacrificed just as much, worked just as hard, and it all just evaporates and blows away in the wind in an instant. So it's interesting, they say hindsight's a wonderful thing, and it is, because I think as you get older, with more perspective, you look back and you think, well, all of those experiences shape who you are, and they teach you, and it's just part of the journey. And you hear that as a kid, and you think that's just a rubbish cliche. It's all about winning. It's all about. But now I mean, yesterday Neri and I were up at the local park. Both our two youngest, Austin and Laney, they had their zone cross country races, and I think you're just a little more philosophical, because you see these kids just turning themselves inside out. And some of the kids at the back of the field are putting in just as much effort. Maybe they don't have quite the talent, or they haven't got access to quite the coaching, but sometimes the effort's still there, and they're at the back of the field though, and you think, well, they should be applauded for that though. I mean, I guess you just get a little more philosophical with a bit of experience, and also, sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees, can you? When you're in the midst of a professional career, your objective is to win world titles or to perform, and that's it. You have very little peripheral vision for anything else. It's a narrow focus, isn't it?
I mean, I envision you and Neri out there. You're being parents. You're seeing those ones behind, and oh my gosh, that poor little guy. I hope he can make it in. And he's in like 20th place, and you feel for them. And I mean, I've got a 6-year-old grandson playing Little League Baseball, and my son Andy played, and now I'm watching this grandson, and I feel for these kids that just don't have talent and they can't throw yet. And come here, buddy, let me help you out. You you turn into this soul of wanting to help everybody. But when you mentioned about your kid, I just brought a thought back that you're going to have to tell me what year it was. But when you talked about maybe your kid seeing a video of an interview or something, I don't know if they'd ever see the video of the award ceremony in Kona when the torrential downpour came and everybody left. And I was only halfway through the program, and finally I go, okay, now let's bring up our champion, Craig Alexander, to give his speech. I don't know if that was 8, 9, or 11, but you remember how hard that rain was. It was ridiculous. It was sweet. And then you're up there, you're giving a speech, you tear your aloha shirt off. There was like only 40 of us left. People were going crazy. Was that a moment in time we're never going to be able to forget? That's the greatest.
That was amazing. And they're the memories that you cherish the most, I think. Those sort of little anecdotes that, there was only 40 or 50 hardy souls left under the tables right at the front.
I know.
And it was so good. I mean, I remember the rain came down so hard, you started getting electric shocks through the microphone, and they had to cut.
Yeah,
they had to shut it.
Put it down.
They had to shut it down, and we'd done all the age group awards, and we were moving into the but it was crazy, because I remember afterwards when we got into the King, and I'd walked across. I'd used the Omake as a little bit of shelter walking across to the King Cam, and as we were walking down a Leahy Drive, everybody goes out afterwards. We go to Lulu's or Huggo's or whatever just to really socialise and, just be in each other's company and enjoy the moment. And, I mean, you would remember a Leahy Drive. A lot of the shop owners had come down and put sandbags in front of their shops. A Leahy Drive the water was up over the gutters into the shops. It was crazy how much rain came down. But, I mean, Lucy was 3 years old. We were looking at the photos the other day. A few memories popped up and... My mum was there as well. She was saturated. It was fun. They're the good. And I remember giving the speech to about 30 people. Welsh, I remember Welshie was there in the front row under the table, and yeah, they were great
Yeah,
memories. You know, they're the things that
that
you
was.
miss, and the people who you miss. You know,
I know. I can see some of the faces of the ones that stayed, and
yeah.
it was like our little family. It was actually beautiful. Crowie, what do you want to leave behind to the sport, so to speak? A gift from you. What would you like to leave behind?
Um, it's a good question, isn't it? And people often ask you the question. I think in terms of legacy, my main legacy is to my family, to my kids. Um, and for them, I think hopefully they've seen that the most important thing you need to bring is hard work and effort, and surround yourself with good people. Hopefully that's the lesson, some of the lessons I've imparted to the kids. Having good people around you, never being too proud or scared to ask for advice and help. Um, humility, respect for others it's important, very important. I mean, what's happening in the world at large can be crazy, but I think sport is a little maybe microcosm of that. And I say to my kids all the time, you know, you got to congratulate your opponent after, before and after, and whatever the outcome. So having respect for your opposition is important. And for the sport, what could I leave? I guess hopefully I've added to and enriched Australia's proud tradition in our sport. I would like, what gives me a lot of satisfaction is when you're at events or you're speaking and people come up to you after and say things like, I remember seeing you on television 10 years ago and you inspired me to get into the sport or to get fit again. And, hopefully that can be my gift to the sport, even if a handful of people have seen an interview or a race that I did and were inspired to get fit, to get healthy, for whatever reason. And like I do, Mike, our sport has been a vehicle for a lot of people to turn their lives around from depression, addiction, and a whole range of things. So, if people have seen me race and it's inspired them to get out and have a crack, I would like that to be my gift to the sport.
Good for you. And before I go to my last question, it's kind of the same last question I ask all the guests about, called tri-table racing. I got to tell you, I usually don't talk about somebody's sponsors, but Team Vespa, that's got to be the best sponsorship ever. I saw you on the Vespa. I go, I wish I had that in Kona. I wish I had that in my garage. That has got to be the greatest, dude. You must love that.
Yeah, it's good. And don't worry, mate, we will hook you up in Kona. You'll be getting up and down a Lee Drive.
I didn't know why.
You'll be sorted, don't worry. But, it was good. I mean, look, isn't it wonderful when non-endemics see what you and I see and all the people who love our sport, which is the great attributes and characteristics of triathletes at all levels, the discipline, the performance. And, it came about by chance. I just happened to be working in a coaching aspect with a gentleman who was a high-level executive in their business, and he just thought there was a lot of synergy, a lot of alignment between the values that they share as a performance brand and what they see in our sports. So it just seemed to be a perfect fit. But yeah, for those of us who have been to major events like Kona, it's going to be it's the only way to get around town. So yeah, but we'll hook you up, mate. You'll be flying up and down in some sort of custom little rig. We'll organise something.
I love that. So the final question is on Find Your Finish Line is titled Tri-Table Racing. In the off-road racing world, I've got great friends that race the Baja and everything, and they call it bench racing. They sit around the bench, the picnic table, the table, the kitchen table, and reminisce about the race, memories of what happened on that race. Give me a memory of something that happened in a race for you that was so funny while it happened. You're racing and all of a sudden you had to laugh. Like, are you kidding me? You remember anything like that?
Well, not that I had to laugh, but just that it sort of shocked me a little bit. It happened in Kona in 2009. And I've told the story once or twice before, but not for a long time. We were coming up to Harvey, the turn on the bike, and there was a couple of guys off the front. Lieto, obviously, he just started his breakaway. I want to say Torbjorn, big Torbjorn was off the front. But I was in the next group of athletes, which was the front group. And what I like to try and do as we were coming to Harvey is I'd like to get to the front of the group, because you call out your race number, and then when you make the turn, you can get your special needs. So you call out your race number as you go past the special needs table. And 09, obviously I was race number 1 because I'd won the year before. So I called out number 1, and I went down, made the turn at Harvey Town and came out. And when I rolled into the special needs table, the volunteer had the wrong bag. She didn't have bag number 1. And at the last minute, she realised and took it away. So I just rode through, and about 2 minutes later, well, not even 2 minutes later, probably 30 seconds later, Andreas Raylert, who was doing the race for his first time, and obviously a very decorated athlete, had been to 3 Olympic Games. I think had a top 5 at the Olympics. He'd been on the podium at 70.3 Worlds. Just a great athlete. Ended up having 7 podium finishes in Kona. Incredible record. But in his first race in Kona, he noticed that he was obviously sitting somewhere behind me in the group. He saw that I missed my special needs. So he grabbed his own special needs and he grabbed mine as well. And then he rode up to me with my special needs bag in his mouth and just handed it to me during the race. And I wouldn't say it made me laugh in terms of it wasn't a hilarious moment, but it made me smile, in that in the midst of the World Championships, a guy has that much respect and just presence of mind, I guess, to help out a fellow competitor. And that's the kind of, they're the memories that you do have. I went on to win that race, and Andreas finished 3rd. We ran, you might remember, he and I ran together for about 25 kilometres that day. We ran, I shot out a T2 quickly, but he caught me, and then we ran along a Leahy Drive, we ran up Polani, we ran all the way out to the Energy Lab together until I started to edge ahead. But yeah, we were rivals battling for a World Championship that day, but he still grabbed my special needs bag and brought it up to me with my nutrition in it. And it's something I thank him for every time I see him these days. And he's so humble and he's gracious. He just says, "Oh, CROWIE, not at all, of course. It's what I should have done." And so that's a moment that makes me smile when, because you think it's high-level racing and it's World Championships, but it's still sport. It's still sport, and you see humanity out there in many forms all the time. And I experienced it that day with Andreas, and something I'll never forget. Yeah, it's a great memory. So, yeah, it wasn't a memory where I just burst into laughter, but I always smile when I think of it.
Oh, I guess you do. It makes me warm in my heart. I had never heard that story, and Andreas, knowing the type of character he is, it doesn't surprise me, but it does surprise. It's going to surprise a lot of people, because obviously we're talking about the World Championship, and it has to be dog eat dog sometimes, because you want to be number 1. So that's a beautiful story. Thank you very much for sharing that. I appreciate that. CROWIE, how can people get a hold of you or find you or follow you so they can ask you questions or coaching? How do you want them to be able to do that?
Social media. I'm on Twitter, on Instagram, Facebook, all of those things. We've also got the coaching business, Sensigo, so we have a website and we've got social media channels. And it's something, I've had the coaching business for a long time now, but I've really been much more invested in it the last 6 to 12 months. So for me, that was one of the upsides of the pandemic, I guess. Really taking more ownership and getting more engaged in that side of my life. So yeah, people can find me. CROWIE Alexander is my Instagram. So I message, if people message me, I always message back. So I'm pretty easy to find, and hopefully when the events start up again, I'll be floating around. That's one thing I'm sure you have, as a lot of people have, just being at the events, being in and around our community. But I'm hopeful this year, the back end of this year, I'll be floating around a few more events. So if people see me, come up, grab me, ask a question or two, let's have a coffee. But yeah, I'm easy to find, Mike. I'm easy to find. I'm floating around.
Okay. Well, CROWIE, I can't wait to see you at the next event somewhere in the world, so we can get together and tip one or two. But thank you very much for your time. Say hello to the family and Neri, and give her a hug for me, and keep doing what you're doing, because our sport is so much better off because Craig Alexander has been a part of it, and better yet, is still a part of it. So keep it up, young man. What you do and the type of family man you are is an example to live by. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Mike. They're lovely words, mate. And thank you for having me on. It's great to catch up.
My pleasure. So find your finish line, presented by Active Ice, the official topical pain relief partner of Ironman. Hey, if you enjoyed the show, subscribe. If you'd like to become notified of upcoming shows, you can do that on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Overcast, or right from my website at mikeriley.net. And remember, everybody, there are things in life and racing that we don't always have control over. But we do have control over our attitude. If you take care of it, it will get you to the finish line. As always, I'm Mike Riley. My warmest aloha to each and every one of you. We'll see you next time.